In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to drink a bottle of ice wine and read a small piece of essay written by me a few years ago when I first moved to settle down in this part of China in the northeast. The essay is a recount of an extraordinary experience, so extraordinary that at some point you might find it hard to believe, in which case, let's count it as a fictional. And the bottle of ice wine was produced about 100 miles away from here. It's called the ice wine because the farmers would go in the very early hours in the morning to the vineyard in late December to pick the grapes, where the outdoor temperature could be as low as minus 10 degrees Celsius. And the grape berries, after picking, would go to be pressed immediately into icy syrup, which then would go through a very slow process of fermentation for at least 3 to 4 months. The wine wouldn't be ready for tasting until the next early summer. The variety is a hybrid, first created in France by a Frenchman named Jean-Louis Vidal. Ironically, today, this grape variety is banned and made illegal by the French government to eliminate excessive competition, as they would call it. Fortunately enough, the grape variety survived in Canada, where the farmers find it competent in adapting to the cold local climate and for ice wine production. The grape arrived in China in the early 2000s, I believe, and this bottle was made from grapes in the year 2023. Let's open it. It smells of grape and a bit of botrytis, which is the smell of rottenness that I like very much, but some other people don't. Sweet. It's mouthful, sugary, easy to go down, let's say. Especially good when you have a very sober tasting system in your mouth. Great. Okay, let's start reading my essay. Here we go. My wife and I are quiet residents in a small fishing village at the border river. Harmless country folks, of course. However, as there flows the border river, across which resides the mysterious comrades of the other side, one gets to have one story or two to tell, often involving the comrades. Here is mine. An entrepreneur friend from South China got introduced to a man who, in turn, got introduced to a lady whose friend happens to be High Commissioner to the border city from across the river. High Commissioner is apparently anxious to be great chums with my friend. So he proposed a banquet should be arranged to the fullest extravagancy in honor of him, who insisted I and wife must come and join, to cheer the old boy up, as he put it. As part of the mystery, venue of banquet was often kept a secret until a car was sent to chauffeur the guests to one of the old boy's usual favorites. In our case, it was a Maybach, glittering in the street light, sleek like a Siberian sable. In where we shoveled, and presently we found ourselves seated at a large rotating table with Adidon-type music played on the room stereo, while the interpretress, a handsomely dressed girl, was dandling between her Chinese customers who were talking loudly, eager to make friends, and her comrades who, in contrast, were reluctant or much reserved in laughters and chatters. As cold dishes were brought in, all the Chinese attendees were rearranged, each to be seated next to a comrade. "Please practice your foreign language and make friends," as one official, who later was found out as director of the Comrades' Chamber of Commerce, dictated. So we obediently practiced our foreign languages. "안녕하세요," "ni hao," "What lovely weather today," one exclaimed. "Indeed, how lovely," agreed by another. Soon the chaos died down and silence ruled the atmosphere as people quickly realized their command of the foreign languages could only afford a conversation that far. The waitresses, evidently sophisticated comrade ladies, ushered in the liquor to save the desperate banquet from awkwardness. As they believed, as a rule, any social dead ends could be eased by the considerable amount of alcohol. "Soju, sir?" "No." "Beer, sir?" "What kind?" "There is the handcraft draft and Qingdao." "Or would you like a bottle newly arrived from across the river?" "No beer, sir." "How about some wine?" "There is the red and the Jose." "French, sir?" "Yes, French." In no time, every guest found themselves the proprietor of at least a bottle of beer of some kind, 2 glasses of wine full to the brim, and several regional liquor bottles of various characteristics. All opened, vapor buzzing off the tops. Then a cup of abalone soup was served to each diner, with ginseng stubs and a small tray of cold caviar. And following up were plates of calf steak, dressed in curious-looking mushrooms of some kind. I had long had my mouth drooling beyond manners allowance, and yet nobody seemed ready to stir a finger towards the chopsticks. Again, as a rule, one was expected not to be so rude as to kick off one's feast unannounced out of one's own will, let alone kick off someone else's feast in circumstances of such cross-cultural importance. It was like at Vivaldi's Summer. The gale was up and gone, clouds had been brooding to their heaviest, and suddenly the music refrained and the notes put to a rest. I and the comrade next to me, who would in his more usual days, I dare say, have been a most distinguished high official serving his puritanical government office, who had always behaved in front of his subordinates with dignity and awe, who had just crossed the river to arrive in this materialistically corrupt city of ours, to an appetite orgy as such, are on the verge of a major collapse, physically and spiritually as well. To everyone's relief, the old boy finally popped in, just in time to the crowd's despair, and in the highest spirit, he waved his way into the master seat at the table. Kick off, please. Who am I to have you, my most honorable guests, waiting for so long?" The man wasn't tall and had a portly figure. He wore a newsboy cap with its roof to the side rather in a dandy style, his face forlorn and red, suggesting he might have just come from another banquet of the same kind. His demeanor reminded me a great deal of Sir John Falstaff of Henry V, boastful, seemingly warm, always enjoyed a banter about women. Delicious. With Sir John's blessing, I started devouring my dishes, having them washed down with Bordeaux reds. Following the comrades' etiquette, there apparently wasn't room for a junior member to make any point of an address. Sir John did most of the talk or lecture when it came to his compatriots. Then there was the friend from South China. The two of them quickly became great chums, to such an extent that there shouldn't be any secret kept from one another. The fellow next to me, having seen my less civil dinner table manners, was just about to follow suit, when Sir John's speech turned into their mother tongue, and something involving our general came up. He suddenly turned solemn. Pah! Decidedly, he thumped his chopsticks back to the table and instantly stood up, bowed 90 degrees. 네, 알겠습니다. Being standing for some time for the old boy to conclude his speech, my fellow was exempt from the burden of devouring food for a further while. Presently, 6 courses of premium quality had passed, and my dishes were empty. By the time he was seated again, I folded my napkin in a ring after having thoroughly wiped my mouth. I didn't know how it was for him. For me, dinner was finished. The poor fellow couldn't be younger than 55 at the time, nearly fainted from a day's travel and hearing too much of our supreme leader's doctrine, while empty in belly. He was summoned again to stand up a few more times. Within each interim, he silently stuffed in large quantities of beef and caviar, sometimes salmon with gulps of wine, so gently as to not attract any more attention, so that the word could leave him in peace. Alcohol worked its effect, and the party turned gay. Even Sir John was relaxed, and his sporting self had taken the better of his person, temporarily suppressing his insatiable appetite to a good old speech, allowing all the nice fellows to an uninterrupted feast of abundant meat and wine. At one point, the party went so gay that the old boy made a point to my wife across the table that her beauty was such that he could rank it on top of all comrade women in town. And are you Korean, my dear? Such beauty could only be justified if you are Korean. Oh, you are not? Then you must become one, my dear. It was at this moment my wife, a fearless woman, unfamiliar with banters, belittling the female sex, thought the old boy's alcohol-induced jokes were carried too far. And we decided our dinner was indeed finished. But the old boy stood up as we fed each of the guests well and walked towards us at the door, folding my wife's hand in his staunch palms. But my dear, it's not even half through yet. What about the other 6 courses to come? My wife extracted her hand from the deadly grip, rushing to the door as I stood between the old boy and the door as blockage to a possible pursuit. Outside in the streets, we were reunited to the busy traffic and the refreshing river breeze. The city was still lit as if in daytime. The sky high and clean, we held hands, promenading the riverbank path, and laughed madly all the way back home. What an extraordinary night